Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel pretended like it's business as usual when the United States, especially Donald Trump in particular, declared in a shocking statement that all of a sudden the United States reached a deal with Yemen that would stop the mutual aggression, the mutual attacks. Well, it was a hostile move initiated by the United States against Yemen for the sake of Israel, to support Israel. But Israel was not included in this agreement, and Yemen continued to attack Israel. As a matter of fact, Yemen escalated. They said, now we don't only have a naval embargo, sea embargo on Israel, we also have an aerial embargo. We're closing the Israeli airspace with multiple attacks on multiple parts of Israel, and also Ben Gurion Airport, one of them landing heavily and leaving a massive mark that Israel didn't really want to publish, but they had to after people took videos and started circulating them on social media. According to this report, Netanyahu wasn't only blindsided, but also infuriated by the announcement of Donald Trump when he halted the attacks and declared that they reached a deal between America and Yemen for the Ansarullah in Yemen to stop attacking American ships in return for the United States forces not attacking Yemen. And he's also thinking, Netanyahu, that the talks are totally pointless between the United States and Iran because Iran, according to him, will never adhere to a deal, contradicting reality and the fact that Iran was adhering to the deal that they reached during the Obama administration. Now, Frank Lowenstein, who was quoted in this report, said, I think what you're seeing is the Israelis recognizing that as much as they welcomed the election of President Trump and thought that would really give them a blank check to pursue whatever agenda they wanted, Trump has his own agenda. And that agenda is coming at odds with Benjamin Netanyahu. And clearly, these tensions, these differences that are happening between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are real. At the end of the day, all of the escalation that we have seen in the past few weeks, Donald Trump not visiting Israel, despite multiple confirmations coming from Israel now that there are intense attempts coming from Benjamin Netanyahu and his government to ask Donald Trump to come and visit, that is clearly not happening. Now, the interesting part here is that we have more players being included in the talks and in the deals that are happening here. Who? Now, Qatar is involved, Egypt is involved. However, Hamas, they specifically said they appreciate all of the efforts that are happening in Qatar and in Turkey, in Egypt, but also Turkey too. Now, Turkey was a country that Hamas asked to be a guarantor in what's happening. Clearly, they're playing a bigger role, especially with Hamas mentioning that. And from a Qatari perspective and an Egyptian perspective, they were viewing this gesture that is coming from Hamas as something very positive. They said, we appreciate this gesture of goodwill, and it will be a process in reaching an all-out deal. And from Hamas's perspective, they still said that we are open to now close everything in terms of the negotiations and reach the ending of the war. However, we still clearly have a clash of interests between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. Benjamin Netanyahu is only focusing on his administration and his coalition and him continuing and remaining in power, whereas Donald Trump wants to reach a deal. Clearly, he managed to reach a deal now with Hamas. Therefore, they're going to release an Israeli American. And he also forced Benjamin Netanyahu to have a temporary deal with Gaza. How is that going to be implemented? And what does that mean for the Gazan population and for the continuation of the war? Well, firstly, we need to understand that this is a very, very big sign of a serious split happening between at least the visions of the United States and Israel. That doesn't mean that the United States is not an ally of Israel, or that this, alliance is totally breaking, but there are cracks. There are serious cracks. The United States, despite the severe stubbornness coming from Benjamin Netanyahu, has managed, according to all of these reports, to enforce an agreement. And despite the fact that Hamas did not confirm that it will include a ceasefire and allowing all of the aid in, Israeli reports said that Israel will have to stop attacking, at least temporarily. They will stop their surveillance flights over Gaza, and they will also allow aid in. If this deal goes into effect and there are certain positive moves, then this could lead to something bigger. But there's something more pressing now with this move, and that is the pressure that is coming from the families of the prisoners of war. We have seen many large, huge protests happening in Israel, especially after the new footage that was released by the Palestinian resistance of more Israeli prisoners of war inside of the Gaza Strip. They are viewing this in shock. They are seeing that the American president is managing to release Israeli prisoners of war, okay, an Israeli American in this case, but many of them have other nationalities too, whereas Benjamin Netanyahu is failing to do so. This is making Benjamin Netanyahu look weak. And despite the fact that he is denying all of the split that's happening or the tensions between him and Donald Trump and the American administration, he cannot deny the fact that there are deals happening and that he is forced to adhere and confirm that they are indeed being implemented. That's why he had the leak initially from his discussion that Hamas might be releasing an Israeli prisoner of war. That is not for Benjamin Netanyahu. That is because they have a deal between them directly and with Donald Trump. Another thing that we need to factor in here is the fact that, well, deals are being implemented between Hamas and the United States directly. And if a small deal gets implemented, that means there's a potential for a bigger deal to be implemented. And if Benjamin Netanyahu will be forced to stop his attack, stop his aggression in Gaza, not that there's any success, by the way, for Israel or any advancement. By the way, they're getting blows after blows in Gaza that I've been speaking about the past few days, and they're only continuing their barbaric massacres against civilians. But there is potential that the United States will impose a bigger ceasefire inside of the Gaza Strip in the coming months. If this ceasefire proves to be successful, or if this temporary deal that will include allowing aid in, having a temporary ceasefire, and releasing Aidan Alexander, if it goes smoothly.